Oh my goodness. Good afternoon, everyone. Didn't get to prep there. So, what is happening when it comes to youth in Africa? I'm going to find a way to bring it into what would have been my opening remarks. And firstly, thank you so much for having me. I think well, inviting me. But I think when I looked at this topic, I was looking when we talked about implications and harvesting the youth bulge. What I wanted to bring to the conversation as someone who is part of the African youth is for us to always remember that we're dealing with a demographic that is ambitious, that is inspired, that is motivated, that wants to do something. If there's a common thread across the African continent, it's that African youth want to do something. And we want to do something in the face of polycrisis, where we've got health issues, where we've got political instability, we've got the climate crisis, and all of those other things. But we all want to do something. And what I find to be the question of are we left with implications of a youth bulge, or are we left harvesting the benefits of having a youth bulge as the continent is what are we enabling? When the youth want to do something, what are we enabling for that something to be? Because we um, an example I wanted to give you is we're currently hosting the local conference of youth on climate change. And the first two parts of it is online. We had, for the past 2 years, we've on average had 300 young people register and about 100 join online using their own data and their own time. And that is because there's a platform here that is created for young people who want to do something about the climate crisis to come together and do something phenomenal. But if that space is not created, if those resources are not created, if they're not given autonomy, then we have a problem because something will be done. It just won't be something that we're happy about. So I think in closing of the question, what's happening across Africa is young people want to be amazing. One, young people are ambitious, they're inspired, they're motivated, they want to act. They need the resources, which they don't have access to as of yet, and it could go either way. I remember a few years ago, it was the youth dividend, and now it's the youth bulge. But yeah, I think that's it. Brilliant young people, but it could go either way. Are we using that brilliance for good, or are we using that brilliance for bad? Some of the best minds that have ever lived are heroes, and some of the best minds are people we speak shamefully about. So, um, yeah, I mean, that would be my opening remarks and trying to touch on the topic for round one.
I think touching on what some of the panelists have said, I'm hearing a lot of the same themes. So, like the minister said earlier, youth is a power to Africa when it comes to solutions and open up doors so that we can see brilliance. A theme that runs across a lot of the conversations from academia and research, from entrepreneurs and even people affected by climate change is that they have the solutions. So people know the challenges that they're facing and they have the solutions. And someone spoke about, one of the panelists spoke about this earlier. But what's missing within those solutions is space to execute them. So even in academia, we've got brilliant, brilliant researchers across the African continent. But when you look at where does that research end up, what does it inform? It goes and collects dust. So that thing of how do we bring all of those everyone has a solution from their respective backgrounds, and when they come together they can turn that youth bulge into something that's positive for the continent. And I think when we talk about solutions, taking from some of the questions that some of my colleagues were responding, some of the other panelists were responding to, um, when we, I think what's important as well as we look at solutions is bringing young people in and African people across as partners, not as someone who something needs to be done something about. So when we come up for solutions of we've got these many young people we need solutions in the face of the climate crisis. What can we do? We all know how innovative um, young people are. Sometimes it's not even about doing something, it's about doing less. We've got policies across the continent where some countries are now starting to tax data. Some of them are starting to tax content creators, which takes us back when we're trying to go into areas that would be creating jobs and traditional jobs, because with the future, with the present that we have and the future that we're going into, we need unconventional jobs. We need unconventional solutions. We need ideas that we haven't seen before. And the people who have those are a lot of younger people. So looking into how do we bring that in? Earlier, I think the former ministers talked about how immigration is not bad, and one of the other panels talked about help each other, which I fully agree with. When we work together as a continent, we're hedging our bets the in the face of any challenge that may come up. When we open borders, but in the meantime, suspend visas, we're able to, if there's an opportunity for work in South Africa for someone from Botswana, they're able to take it up. If there's a shortage, in Botswana, we only have 2 million people. Yet we've got a very stable economy. There's a lot of opportunities here, but we are a very small country. If we could have other skilled people come in, then it works for the economy and it works for young people across the continent. So looking at removing those barriers, and if we're to, so I like to give prescriptive actions. And I think if I was to list the things of what needs to be done to enable the brilliance of the youth bulge, first, I'll give you like five, because I think looking at time, this is probably for last time I'm speaking. But first would be access to flexible funding that allows people to explore. We're always seeing brilliant innovations from outside the African continent because people are given blank checks. When we are funded, we're told this is $20 and you can do anything you want as long as it responds to adaptation in a way that speaks to food and. So more funding that allows people to explore, and from that opens up avenues for brilliance. And then the second one is when resourcing storytelling. We still have a huge challenge of how people perceive Africa, not just Africa, African youth. And we still don't take things like storytelling seriously. So with all the brilliance that is happening, all the things that I hear about on the podcast, a lot of them are hard to find. And perception, unfortunately, hits our pocket. If people have the perspective that Africa is unstable and the youth can't be trusted, and because they're not getting the true stories, we're not putting the resourcing into telling the true positive stories of Africa, then we're going to continue to have a negative perception tax when it's not the reality of what's on the ground. So second one, resource positive storytelling by African youth. And when engaging, our governments should be proactive. When they're engaging foreign governments, when they're engaging other regions, they should not go there as receivers, but go there as we're coming into this deal looking for something for our youth population. We've got brilliant resource that are young people. Germany, for example, I think they last I heard they need to bring in about 40,000 workers every year. When we are speaking to a country like Germany, they're not doing us a favor. They need labor coming in to keep their economy going. So when we negotiate with that, negotiating from a place of power, and our governments, when they stand for youth, not talking about them like they're an expense on the balance sheet, but more like they're an asset. And in that, believing in them, even what they're able to tap into for them globally will change. And when we make agreements to open up opportunities for young people in Africa, when our governments, because a lot of entities engage our governments, from the work I do with climate, anything you want to do, someone will be like, what does your government say? What's your government position? We only work with governments. When they negotiate with these, looking at avenues of, yes, we want the main person to be government, but our governments have countries to run. They've got people to keep safe, people that they need to protect, creating other avenues of how can outside of us, young people take advantage of these open doors so that they're not always going through the bottleneck, which is government. So they open the door, they hold it open, they move out of the way to see young people do what they can. And I think that's about those are my four prescriptions for how we can make sure that we harvest the youth wealth. Okay, my final thought is going to respond to some of the key questions asked. On the north-south, the divide, we know it exists. The way to address it is to start to partner. And then when we start to partner, start to share the stories of it happening. That's the only way to do it, to actually actively close it. And then the second one, I think there's a professor who said they work with youth. Someone please give her a hug. We know how we can be. But when we are frustrated, and what governments can do on the comment that the professor made is creating enabling environments. Once again, opening the door and standing to the side. If they really, really want to do something, they can look at canceling, getting the African debts cancelled with some of the multilateral, getting African debts cancelled, and then that money can go towards building the infrastructure that we need to have amazing AI tools. That's one thing that they can do. Otherwise, leaving resourcing and leaving youth to be amazing. And the young lady, I didn't
You're going
catch,
over 30 seconds.
Okay, one last one. I want to respond to the young lady who spoke about what is the expectation for young people when it comes to policy making. I think my advice to you would be know the policy making process so that you can keep the pressure on. Being an active citizen is not only the time when you inform policy is not only at the ballot. It's also about during the process when a policy comes up. Do you know when they go for consultations? Attend those consultations. Make sure that your voice is in there.
Okay, thank you.
Make
Thank
sure
you,
that they
Pato.
knew what their processes were and they acted.